Have you considered changing your job as a software engineer, especially during layoffs and hiring freezes? It's Felix here from Culture of Code, and in this video, we ask 5 people in the tech industry about changing jobs, from how they transition from being a software engineer into other roles like becoming a product manager or an engineering manager, or to go from being a software engineer into entrepreneurship. And if you're thinking about changing companies completely, what to look out for when you're changing your job during hiring freezes and layoffs. Let's dive in. Tiffany Jachja, software engineering manager at Autodesk, explains how to change jobs during hiring freezes. I think when, let's say, last year, a couple years ago, for the last like 5, 10 years, when you were ready to kind of make those switches, the market is much more fluid for you to say, I don't like it here. Let me look for something else. And it'd be pretty easy to, or easier to transition than it is today. And, if someone's watching this in the future, this is 2023, where we have strings of layoffs, the market is frozen. I guess what's your advice here? Is it just to kind of hunker down, wait it out? Or if you are in a situation that you're not a fan of, whether it be because you're not a fan of the kind of work you do, the kind of culture, and you want a switch, but then you're fearful of what the environment is like out there. I guess what advice do you have for someone in that situation?
Yeah, my advice, just from a intuitive standpoint, is don't move from a place of fear. And it's very common in careers as well to be like, well, I don't have enough experience, or I have to do all of these things to get a promotion. Like, that's a place of fear and lack, right? And I really recommend people to move from a place of abundance, come from a place of like, I have a message to share, or I have a passion in this area, or I have really something valuable to bring in this area, and pursue that. In your last question, we talked a little bit more about the intuition behind like being willing to let something go for something better, right? The practical standpoint from that, the practical approach to that is going out there, like putting yourself out there. If that is a value that you have, be known for what you're doing in the world and interact with your community, interact with people, start sharing what you're doing, because that brings you a lot more opportunities than you would ever imagine. And you never know who's watching or who's looking for the next superstar, the next you, right? Specifically you. And I think sometimes it's easy to be like, okay, well, the job market's like this and everybody's like this. But the reality of it is people are still hiring, people are still looking. And if you just happen to be there at the right time as someone's looking and they're looking for exactly you, you've got a match there. It can be really hard to do that little mind shift, right? But catch yourself when you're moving from a place of lack, moving from a place of like, oh, but this and this, but also I have to do this, because you don't have to do anything.
Laura Ferguson, former senior engineering manager at Google, who's also a tech veteran, talks about her journey from software engineering into entrepreneurship. I want to talk a bit about your transition into entrepreneurship with the Wrap That Gives. So I guess what made you decide to make this leap, and how did you come about making that decision? It's a pretty big decision to make.
So it sounds sudden, but it is something that I've been thinking about, the particular problem and also entrepreneurship, for some time. So about 10 years roughly. And I worked at a startup called Create.io, which is a real estate startup. I was the CTO at that startup. It was actually one of my dreams to be the CTO at a startup, and just happened across that project. Met I met my co-founders through LinkedIn. They found me really, and we had a really good run. And I really loved being in that role, the creativity of it, trying to figure out how everything worked. And then I had some other adventures. And I think of it that way. I don't think of it as, success or failure. I know, of course, there's big successes out there. But I again was thinking of it as, okay, let me see if I could make this business work, and let me learn from it. And if it's not going to work, then I'll just move on. And that might be I get as far as writing some ideas down in a business plan, or working with some people and seeing what they're exploring, and so I took that path. Now, I went off to work at various places the last few years to, you know, make ends meet and all of that, which we all have to do sometimes. And then I came back, and I had been playing with this idea when I was at school at UPenn. I took a program in social engineering design, and then got certified as in game thinking, which is another form of design thinking that Amy Jo Kim has written about. She has some great courses on. And so game thinking is about how you actually build games, make them, addictive and things like that, and really create engagement around enterprise products and anything else that you want to be people to be delighted by. And then the social innovation design, program was really a great look at how can we make a difference in this world. And so when I was there, I was thinking about what ideas have I had that I want to continue on. And so Wrap.gifts is our goal is really to look at a problem, I probably most of us have had, maybe you've had, where I send a gift to someone and it's going to show up in an Amazon box and maybe it has some nice, you know, sparkly wrap inside and a little slip of paper that says happy birthday, from Laura, but it's kind of generic, and I used to like wrapping presents and giving gifts and stuff like that that were physical. But nowadays, it just doesn't happen without a lot of effort, right? Ship it to yourself and so on. That doesn't make any sense. And really, what's the point? The point is we're sending them something useful or we're sending them something beautiful, but we're really trying to express a sentiment. We're trying to say what we feel. And when we're trying to express that sentiment, what we feel, we have this blocker that is all these little businesses that maybe they'll handle it for you, but that's a rarity. And so I'm looking at ways, how can we get the sentiment expressed and separate that a little bit from the actual gift, but also express it more, like make it more custom. And I did some research and it seemed to be people like that custom, like it's actually from me to you, or it's from me to, whoever. So that's the piece that we're looking at. And we're just trying to make it fun and engaging and delightful.
Dan Schiebler, head of machine learning and artificial intelligence at Abnormal Security and previously a machine learning engineering manager at Twitter, shares how you can transition from being a generalist software engineer into something more specific like being a machine learning engineer. Let's say that someone is currently a more generalist software engineer and wants to explore one of these two paths, either machine learning, as you had described it, or the data science route. How do you see that transition happening? What do they need to focus on? Is it a transition you see that's common? And what have you seen as a successful transition from more of a generalist, like software engineer, into one of these more specialized fields?
I'd say the most common transition that I see is someone who's working on back-end software engineering, especially things that have to do with data, starting to become more and more involved with machine learning models. Probably initially the route of working on data that's utilized to feed machine learning models or systems that are utilized to serve machine learning models, and getting closer and closer iteratively to training and deploying the models themselves, which is really the kind of most machine learning centric component of the process. Although I'd highlight all of these are parts that are equally important, often equally compensated, and equal opportunity for impact in each of these different areas of the machine learning lifecycle. Serving features to machine learning models and deploying machine learning models are things that do not require a tremendous amount of knowledge of how the models were trained to begin with or how the models are evaluated. And the most difficult parts there really are distributed systems software engineering. I see that as a very common entry point for people with software engineering backgrounds looking to develop themselves more in the machine learning and artificial intelligence spaces.
Vineet, a Google engineering manager, shares his tips on transitioning from a team lead or senior engineer into becoming an engineering manager.
I think it is particularly tricky. You are transitioning into the same team, and now people who used to be your peers now report to you. In that case, like having that dynamic is challenging. And I think what can help you is before even you get to that stage, having a really good relationship with your teammates and earning their trust is very important, because that helps you tremendously. When you become their manager, they already know what kind of person you are, and they feel that no matter if you are the manager or peer, you have good intentions and you would be supportive. That plays a huge role. Another thing that helps is being kind of like a role model in many different areas, right? Like, may it be technical expertise or influencing in other ways, then they can see that as a natural transition. Because if they already look up to you as a technical expert in that field, then they may not feel that, hey, why this person is becoming the manager when other people are more technically capable than them. So having that solid understanding of the tech stack, having technical like language or other tech stack expertise, and influencing and earning their trust will help you kind of naturally go into that transition. I don't mean that it is easy, but that is something that you could do as a homework or before you actually get to that particular level so that your transition becomes easier. Not necessarily easy, but I think everything has some challenges associated.
Julian Dunn, a director of product management at GitHub, shares how you can transition from a software engineer role into a product management role.
I'm much more of a generalist, and I get bored pretty quickly once I get to knowing about 70 or 80% of a field or a domain or a job. And again, if you're a developer listening to this, doesn't necessarily mean you have to follow my path. Obviously, I don't give advice. I just give my stories. There are lots of developers that spend an entire career in a particular domain, becoming an expert and moving up to senior, to staff, to principal, and eventually to distinguished engineer within a particular domain. That's a perfectly fine career path to follow. And we really definitely value those folks that we have, staff, principal, and distinguished engineers. But my journey has been, I feel like, as you mentioned, I started out actually doing hardware engineering in the day a long time ago, over 25 years ago. And I just wanted things to move a little bit more quickly. Hardware is, I think it's a lot different these days, but nevertheless, when you're fabricating something that's physical, the amount of time, when we talk about agile today in software development, you really don't have a lot of that in hardware because ultimately you need to fabricate something. And then the feedback loop of getting that part back and testing it and validating it. And then that design cycle, that loop is pretty slow. And of course, nowadays simulators are more modern. Nevertheless, you're still fabricating something. And to get that product out to market, when you think about how long it takes Intel to get a chip out to market, that's going to be upward of 4 or 5 years. They're starting from a completely new product line. I just wanted things to move faster. But that's how I quickly moved into doing software. Once I got into doing software, I did software for a few years. And then I actually just follow problems, I guess, that exist in an organization. Where can I apply my skills to create the most leverage for the organization? And I kind of follow my nose to go and do that. So I was working for a company and doing software development, but actually the operations side, web ops, or what I guess today we would call DevOps, was just not very mature. The company was growing. The online presence was growing very, very quickly. This was the age of, I was working in broadcasting. This was the age of what we call media at the time, putting all this content online, and the operations were just falling down, right? The site was crashing all the time. We weren't able to sustain the traffic. So I volunteered to go over there and to help them out. And that's how eventually I started a long career in doing that kind of stuff and DevOps and what have you. And then I guess my pivot into product management again was following this, what did the company need? Really, I was working as a consulting engineer at the time, kind of a solutions engineer for a DevOps tools company. It's called Chef. Maybe some of you have heard of it. The product still exists, and I don't know the company's that hot or popular anymore, but the company really needed help doing product management. They didn't have a formal product management department, and it really showed in terms of the types of things that we were able to bring to market and responsiveness to customer needs. So a colleague of mine and I went and started the product management department. We brought along a third person and introduced product management to our organization. That was my first product management job. I knew I wanted to do product management for a long time. It was really hard to get into it if you'd never done product management before. So I figured the easiest way to do it is just make a lateral move, the same company that I was at, and then have that on my resume.
If you enjoyed this clip, make sure you watch the entire video, which has a lot more content just like this. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of our episodes where we talk to leaders in the tech industry, from software engineers to product managers to engineering managers, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also click the notification bell. And that's all the time we have for this week. I'll catch you guys on our next episode.